Oh, you're frozen now.
We're frozen? Are we frozen?
No, you're not. And maybe when you hit the record button, you
Okay.
freeze.
I see. Are you sure? Yeah, no, we did click the record button. No, but she says once we turn it off, please. So are we frozen now, Nan?
No, now you're not frozen.
No. Okay, but we have to trim this stuff out. You have to start. Well, you'll edit it. It's easier to just do it. No, come on. Okay. Welcome to Art Dempster and Nan Laird for our discussion of the famous EM paper. By way of personal background, I was a professor at University of Toronto starting in 1985, and Art came in 1986, I think, for a sabbatical for one semester. And Art, you taught a course on Dempster-Shafer theory, which I sat in the whole semester, and Larry Wasserman did as well. And Larry Wasserman was so inspired by your course that he wrote his entire thesis on that topic. So that was really great. And by my calculation, you were about 57 at the time, which is, I'm 67 now, so you're a little younger than I am now. And then since that time, we don't see each other very often, but it's really great to reconnect with you.
And I've got a little bit of background too, because my first job was at Bell Labs, and my boss there was John Chambers, and he was one of your early students, Art.
That's right.
Yeah, and John has since retired, of course, from Bell Labs, and he's actually he's a adjunct professor here at Stanford. Yeah.
I've never talked to him for decades.
And he's 83 years old now.
Oh my, yeah.
So the EM paper's got over 71,000 citations according to Google, which is amazing. And I looked also in the discussion. My supervisor, Brad Efron, was one of the commentators on that paper. And he said, this is an excellent paper, difficult for me to criticize on almost any grounds, which is extremely high praise from someone like Brad. So it's clearly an amazing paper. So would you guys like to tell us about sort of how the paper came about and just tell the story?
Well, I guess it came about because Don Rubin and I were meeting. He was not my student. He was really Bill Cochran's student. But I used to needle him about, being more ambitious about his research. And I think he was, had a job down at Educational Testing Service.
He had already graduated, or?
Yeah, he'd already graduated.
I see.
And we were talking about data sets with missing information, where the Bo Hartley had a particular case of the EM algorithm. And just sitting in Don's office one day, it occurred to me that that was really a much more general idea. So if we jump from there to the end of having written the paper, which astonishes me too, when I look at it, there's no way I could come close to doing anything like that now. It was largely, from my point of view, and perhaps from Nan's, concerned with digging up a lot of, many of them, exponential family models with irregular data sets that had the property that that if you could fill in the data, that's the E step, you would have a very simple way of understanding how to compute the maximum likelihood estimate, say in some kind of a closed form. So as we got Nan involved, at least I did. I'm not sure Nan was connected with Don or in what way she was, but I think it probably was Nan and me working together. We somehow a rather put together quite an impressive list of possible applications. We were just chatting here, and it turns out that a number of the people whose expertise was used in a particular type of application felt cheated because they say, well, yeah, they invented the general idea, but I think of my contribution as naming the two steps, E step and M step, and with it, understanding the generality of the applications.
At what point did you realize that
what lies behind the really large number of citations, which I haven't been tracking. I think maybe 6 or 7 years ago, Nature had some kind of an article, and maybe the number was 55,000 back then. My mind is drifting away a little bit.
Well, I think, Rob, did you have a question?
I had a question. At what point did you guys realize that the EM's algorithm increased the likelihood at every stage? Is that something?
Well, that was another thing. It wasn't until we were well along in the whole story when my phone rang one day, and it was Nan on the line, and saying that I know that each step in each iteration, E followed by M and so on, increased the value of the likelihood. And I was kind of flabbergasted. Why didn't we know that? I guess number of the people who had invented yet particular cases of it did know it. And
and you were able to prove that. Did you prove that, Nan, or was it?
How did Nan learn about increasing the likelihood on each step? Nan?
Thank you, Art. So, it's been a long time for me as well. And I have a very clear memory of what was for me the beginning of the EM algorithm. I mentioned it to Art, but Art just sort of just dismissed that as if that's not the real beginning. But I'm first going to tell you that was that I was Art's student. I was working on a problem of fitting models to large, sparse contingency tables. And Art had this idea that we should fit models that had main effects that were fixed, but then individual cells would have random effects in order to achieve kind of a smoothing type operation. And so I was agonizing over the problem of how to estimate the variance component of the random effects. And I just remember going into Art's office one day complaining about how should I do this. And Art said to me, well, you could always try using that little algorithm. Well, I had no idea what little algorithm he was talking about. So he kind of gave me a rough explanation, and I went out and I worked on this idea, and I did the derivatives of the random effects likelihood. And I could see that if you use this little algorithm, it would converge. If it converged, it would go to the fixed point of the likelihood equation. So I went back to Art's office and I told him what I had discovered. And Art thought for a minute or two, and then he said, well, that works for any exponential family distribution with any kind of missing data. So for me, that was the EM algorithm right there. With regard to, and as Art said, kind of all of those facts were already known but somehow not put together. And what about increasing the likelihood? I have to say, I honestly think that appeared in one of the many papers that I looked at. Perhaps the work by Soonberg is, I think, perhaps the most likely one, which talks about it. But I think it does appear, this fact that it increases the likelihood had appeared already in the literature in one of the numerous papers that we cite.
So I wanted to ask you about this previous work. I mean, in a lot of sciences, they call EM, they call it the Baum-Welsh algorithm, right?
Yes.
So, looking online, for example, there's no papers by Baum and Welsh, and I think that what was happening, they were both working for the government, and the stuff was classified. So I know in the discussion of the EM paper, Baum seems to be saying, "Well, I did a lot of this already," right? I mean, so. How aware were you aware of Baum and Welsh's work, and at what point? Yeah,
we did acknowledge there were publications.
Yeah.
In our list of references, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's true, Baum was quite upset. I tried to assure him that I thought we had given the references to his work. I think there are a couple of them in our list of references.
Yeah. So you presented, who presented it in person to the RSS? Was that Art or all of you?
I know that I presented something, but
Yeah.
maybe I did the whole thing. I can't remember.
And what was the reception like? Was it clear at the time this was an exciting advance, or was the reception sort of moderately enthusiastic?
Well, it is a mathematical idea.
Yeah.
Kind of recognizing that there are all these different applications was the thing that
right.
I thought was my big contribution to it.
Like, I mean, it's clearly a landmark paper, so I guess I'm asking, was that apparent at the time, or did it take many years for people to appreciate it?
Well, I suppose we could do a kind of statistical analysis of the references.
Yeah, that was.
Whether they built up over time.
So I guess I'm asking at the time, was there big applause after you had spoke, or?
So if I may address that issue, I thought that there were most people were extremely enthusiastic and complimentary, but even some people who were enthusiastic and complimentary expressed a lot of disappointment. Either they said, "Well, I've done it already," or they said, "Well, gee, this is a general algorithm, but does the algorithm really work? And you haven't really told us how good the algorithm is, or you haven't given us any specific steps of how to compute the algorithm." Or, the other, I think it's sort of summed up for me, by Orchard's comment, which was, "Gee, this is a great paper. It's unified the mathematics, but it's not very useful." And I think it's just because we didn't show in any detail how these examples worked out. But my feeling is Art is the same as Art's. The real contribution was to provide this very general model for how to represent complete data, missing data, and how to represent complete data likelihood, missing data likelihood, and the derivatives. To me, I think that's the really mark of the paper. That's
it provides a framework, which you can a clear framework. And
yeah,
the original EM algorithm is usually not the most efficient algorithm, but it's so easy to right? It's so easy to program it up as a sort of a straw man, and then it's all kind of accelerated versions of it, right? It's all the whole body of that.
Rob Little referred to it as a stupid but safe algorithm.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good description. It's a very safe algorithm. It's not going to give you the wrong answer.
And it's used in lots of fields as well. Like
Yeah.
often I'll talk to say computer scientists and I'll ask, well, how did you fit this model? They say I used EM.
Or Baum Welsh.
And they'll
Yeah.
say I used EM, and I'll say, oh, okay. And what was the likelihood that you were actually maximizing? What do you mean? They don't know. They didn't know that there had to be an underlying likelihood. They were using EM, and for them it was an estimation method.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of computer scientists.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still are like that, right?
So, any other things to share before we? It's been a really great talking to you, and it's very interesting. Any other things you want to share about the paper?
I remembered Don Rubin at one point described it to me as an instant classic.
Wow, at the time.
I don't know when.
No,
You know,
I
probably a
agree
little
with
later.
that.
Yeah.
I agree with. I think it was an instant
So-
classic.
So that was the reason it got going, was people were able to understand it in very simple examples.
Yeah.
So
It's also a lovely thing to teach. I use it when I teach factor analysis, fitting factor models. Mixture models, of course, is the natural as well.
Yeah, right. It's not just an algorithm, but it gives you an insight into sort of where the information is, right? When you see the EM steps, it helps you understand the problem better, right? Beyond just an algorithm, it's like a construct that you can see where the information for the missing data, like the information loss, it's all there. It's a very nice way to think about missing data or unbalanced designs. So
I recall a discussion, and maybe this comes from several people, that it shouldn't really be called an algorithm. It's a recipe for creating algorithms.
Right.
George Barnard, whom I admired very much as a younger person, brought that up with me, and not in any critical way, but
Yeah.
saying you shouldn't call it an algorithm. I
Well,
don't suppose there is one word that captures the idea, but that, if I may say so, I personally think that what Glenn Schaefer calls the Dempster rule of combination of independent sources of evidence is a much more important and basic advance. And one thing is completely astonishing to me is that almost nobody knows what the Dempster rule of combination is. And even I should be more careful about explaining in great detail exactly how it applies. I'm about to try to teach Nan.
But
I'm afraid Nan doesn't have quite the right feeling about it, but well, maybe it's hopeless, I don't know. But it's astonishing to me that something like the EM gets all these thousands of citations. And I finished up my work in the 1960s by publishing a paper in the Annals of Mathematical Statistics, something about random convex polytopes. You know, the basic idea of DS is that you locate the unknown thing, whether something or a statement being true or false, you locate that in something that mathematically is a random set. There's no concept of randomness, but probabilistically, it's a random set. And I'm losing the drift.
well, I was going to say more.
Trying to get back from the random set idea to why this thing is so fundamental. it has a lot to do with being able to say that certain things are, you just don't know. It takes, and it was a long time before I realized the way I express it now. It was, even today, almost nothing in the active people who work on it. There's a whole society called Belief Functions and its Application Society that has a scientific meeting every 2 years in a school in the off years. They're meeting in Tokyo next year.
Well, your experience reminds me of this Woody Allen movie, I think called The Purple Rose of Cairo, in which he plays a director who in his early part of his career made comedies. And now he's trying to do something serious. And no one goes to his movies, like new movies. And they keep saying to him, we like your old funny ones. So it sounds like the same experience that you got. Well, the EM algorithm, maybe people meet you, Art, they probably say, oh, you're the EM guy, right? Because that's from, yeah.
What I wanted to say about the popularity of one and the total inability of the field to recognize the other.
Yeah.
So I was going to say that this paper in the Annals on Random Context,
We have to have a clean.
which are the spaces that hold the unknown, yeah, I checked one day, this was maybe 5 years ago, about how many citations there had been for that paper, which is really getting into what I now understand much better, but have never published. I can ask you, make a guess at how many citations that paper had. Look them up.
35.
No, it was published.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was published. It took me about 3 years to get it past the editors, but published.
I'm guessing
Any other guesses?
30.
200.
15.
I win.
And
Well, so-
almost all of them were
Art,
from people working students or whatever.
Art and I are working on another instant classic.
Okay. Well, that's a great place to end the conversation. This has really been a lot of fun and really wonderful to see you guys and talk to you. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Just to make contact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll talk soon.